For the first time since 2016, Formula One will have 11 teams and 22 cars competing in the sport starting next season. Cadillac will join the grid, marking General Motors' long-awaited entry into F1, with Valtteri Bottas and Sergio Pérez manning the two cars. However, it will not be like any other new team we've seen joining the grid in recent years, as the Americans are starting from scratch and building the team from the ground up, and they could struggle massively. So much so that some experts even believe they could struggle to make it onto the grid at all. We explain why that is and how that is even possible in today's GPFans Special. We have to start from the beginning to get a full scope of the story. The tale of Cadillac goes back several years. Michael Andretti, son of the American former F1 champion Mario, had the ambition to form a brand new F1 team. Andretti is a very established team in IndyCar, and Michael was dead set on expanding their brand into the pinnacle of motorsport. He swiftly secured backing and made a deal with Cadillac to enter a technical partnership to enter the sport. The plan was to enter in 2025, first with Renault engines and then with GM power units from 2028 onwards. The FIA approved Andretti as an 11th team from a technical point of view, but in early 2024, Formula One itself controversially rejected the bid, despite meeting all the criteria. The main reason as to why Andretti were not allowed entry was that F1 felt Andretti would not provide value to the sport, but rather the other way around. But they did add they might reconsider if GM would be more involved in the project. This would happen shortly after. GM decided to make an entry of their own and just make it a Cadillac team using the foundations Andretti had laid, but without their name attached to the car. F1 is always keen to increase its foothold in the American market, and having the largest automotive company in the country committing to the sport as a future works team quickly got the stamp of approval. Mario Andretti was hired as an advisor to the team, but Michael, who started it all, has to watch from the sidelines. Next up was figuring out the driver lineup. It seemed at first Cadillac were keen on having at least one American, but the obvious pick, Colton Herta, a young IndyCar star who already drives for Andretti, didn't have enough super license points to compete in F1. Logically, a lot of names were thrown around, like Daniel Ricciardo, Mick Schumacher, and even Sebastian Vettel, but Sergio Pérez and Valtteri Bottas were among the favorites from the very beginning. A young second driver was considered, but new team principal Graham Loudon opted to get as much experience as possible and signed both Pérez and Bottas, who have 16 wins, 7 constructors' titles, and over 500 Grand Prix between them. Crucially, both veterans also have vast experience at driving for underdog teams and getting the most out of limited resources. The last new team to enter into F1 was Haas back in 2016, but that is not comparable to the situation Cadillac is currently in. Haas took over the Marussia headquarters in Badbury, for example, meaning they already had their infrastructure built. They also leaned heavily on Ferrari to supply them with parts and the power units, while the chassis was built by Dallara. Cadillac, besides the Ferrari engines for the first 2 years, are doing everything themselves and doing it from their own headquarters. Because of this, expectations are very low. Comparisons have been made to 2010, when Lotus, HRT, and Virgin all joined the grid and were all about 5 seconds slower per lap than the front runners. The race's Ed Stroll, who has covered F1 for decades, believes Cadillac could even struggle to get on the grid at all. Quote, "Early on, I think it's a question of just qualifying. Obviously, there's the 107% rule. I think that's the number if I was Cadillac I'd be looking at and think, right, we need to get under there. That, for me, is the bar that Cadillac is aiming to clear. And it's not a foregone conclusion, because I don't think the new rules are going to help. If there's existing rules, you copy a lot of ideas. If there's new rules, you're generating all of those ideas from scratch." As Stroll hints at, if you are allowed entry into Formula One, it's not a guarantee that you actually get to participate in a Grand Prix. You have to prove first that your car is quick enough, and to that end, we have the so-called 107% rule. But what exactly is the 107% rule? Well, the F1 sporting regulations state that any car that wants to appear at the start of a Grand Prix has to be within 7% of the quickest lap time done in Q1 of qualifying. We're not looking at the pole position time, but only the quickest lap in Q1. But what does that mean? Okay, let's say the quickest lap time in Q1 is a dead 1 minute 30. That would mean all other cars have to be within 7% of this, which would be a 1 minute 36.3 in this case. If you can't perform within that margin, you cannot participate. As you can tell, this is a lot of margin, and it says quite a lot that insiders have so little confidence in Cadillac that they actually wonder if the American team will be able to clear this threshold, even with Pérez and Bottas behind the wheel. Word in the paddock is that it will take Cadillac a very long time to get up to speed, even with the power and industry of General Motors behind them. Renowned F1 journalist Scott Mitchell-Malm even thinks year 1 is a complete write-off. Year 2 will be a glorified testing season, and it won't be until 2028 that Cadillac can maybe become a midfield team. That's the year they get GM power units and become a works team, but it seems like any Cadillac fans will have to be very, very patient before their team starts fighting for points. Either way, that brings us to the end of today's GPFans Special. I hope you learned a thing or two, and if you did, don't forget to follow us on all social media channels to stay up to date in the world of F1. Anyway, I thank you so much for watching this video, and hopefully catch you in the next one. Peace.